Yeah, we're good. Good morning and welcome to our hybrid worship service. I'm Peggy Jenkins and I'll be your celebrant this morning. I'd like to extend a special welcome to all of those who are here worshiping with us for the very first time. We're very glad you're here. If you've come in person, you should have received a welcome packet when you arrived. It's got a card in it. If you fill that out and drop it in the offering basket, we will be able to get in touch to support you in finding your way into our community. In the meantime, please join us in our fellowship hall downstairs following the service for coffee. The library committee will be offering treats for sale, and the proceeds will be used to buy poetry books by our former minister, Lynn Unger. Our welcoming committee members have yellow name tags, and they are happy to answer any questions or point you toward additional information. If you're joining us online, there's a link in our virtual website to an electronic version of that same welcome card. And we host a virtual coffee hour after this service if there's interest. So no need to log off right away. And now, let's say our words of welcome together. Welcome to... Okay. Here we go. Okay. Welcome to you, old friends and new, young and old. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are with us. We are one people of many beliefs, identities, origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Body, mind, heart, and spirit, just as you are welcome here. Now we're going to take a moment to say hello across the technical divide in two parts. First, we're going to show the people joining us on Zoom. If you are at home, please turn on your camera. Now people at home, wave. Now people who are attending this service in our building, it's your turn to wave. We have a few announcements this morning. The Purple Paisley Quilters are raffling a Dresden plate quilt to raise money for good causes. They have given out over $50,000 since 1998. This quilt was pieced by a great aunt of one of our members, and she donated it to our group to finish and raffle off. That member's house burnt down a couple years ago, and all her other quilts were lost. The quilt is full size, 81 inches by 104 inches. Tickets are $1 each or 6 for $5. The drawing is today right after the service. It's not too late to buy tickets downstairs, and your chances are good. Another exciting announcement, our new chairs are arriving on Tuesday. Time is uncertain, so we are asking for volunteers who can be on call to help. Tell Judy Brown or Donna Bradbury if you're available. And everybody has a chance to help us get ready for the new chairs. If you could help at the end of the service, if you are able, take the cushions and the hymnals and put them over on the pews on the side or in the back. That would be very helpful. Here ends the, oh, no, one more announcement.
Hi, My name is Nancy Nelson, and I'm a member of this church. I coordinate volunteers from our church to serve with Family Promise of the Palouse. The way it works is 4 times a year, our church hosts a family, or 2, or maybe even 3 or 4, who need a place to live. When churches come together and give homeless people housing, it makes it possible for them to save their money and get into apartments and places where they can stay safely and permanently. But it only works if churches can step up and host people overnight. We've done it before, and we've done it really well. Now we're getting ready to return to this job, and I'd like you to join us. If you haven't ever helped volunteer with Family Promise, it is an experience that will make you feel like you are directly helping people and making a difference. Please consider being a part of the volunteer team. We have many, many different jobs that are needed, some that are food-based, things like making food and buying food, just simply eating with people. We also need things like setup and takedown, and most importantly, we need people to stay overnight. So if you think you're interested, please find me. You can find me in the directory, or email me at nancy.nelson.moscow.com and find out how you can be a part of our church playing host to families with Family Promise of the Palouse. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'm going to step in just a minute to let people know that there's a training for Family Promise on December 8th from 5:30 to 7. We're providing pizza. Let me just check my calendar and make sure I got that date right. Yes. So 5:30 to 7:30 on December 8th down in our fellowship hall. We'll provide pizza. If you're nervous or want to learn more about the Family Promise program, that would be a good thing to get on your calendar. I also just want to let you know, I'm sorry it's so cold in here. It's okay to go and get your coats. The HVAC system was set to cool, not heat. So it was like 55 degrees when we came in, but it's heating now. I promise it'll get better.
We preface our service by acknowledging that the land on which our homes and our church were built was not uninhabited when European settlers arrived here with their ideas of conquest and ownership. For those of us who live in Moscow, Pullman, or other nearby communities, we live on the ancestral homes of the Nimipu, called Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Shishun, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you are joining us from another place, I encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the place where you now live in the times before colonization and genocide, and where they are now. We pause and remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her people. We also pause for just a moment to light a candle and pray for peace. We hold in our hearts all those currently threatened by greed and imperialism, from the people in the Ukraine to those in Burma and Somalia. May we recommit ourselves to nurturing peace, peace in the world and peace within. Uh-oh. Big motion. Well done. We are hoping that the folks joining us via Zoom have a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let's light our chalices together. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
In the days leading up to Tuesday's election, I found myself turning again and again to a little illustration originally posted on Twitter by an artist and elementary school teacher who goes by the handle Chirp and Whimsy. In it, a woman wraps her arms around a little girl and they have this exchange. But what if they lose? Then we keep fighting for the rights of all people. And what if they win? Oh, dear girl, it's the same answer. It's really difficult for me not to get hooked by the drama and anxiety of politics in our divided United States. And I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty gutted by the local election results. And yet, in response, it's the same answer. The work is the work, regardless of who sits in the State House, the US Capitol, or the White House. We keep fighting for the rights of all people. We don't fight because we are assured of winning. We fight because that's who we are. Knowing that today we'd all be dealing with the aftermath of the election one way or the other, I chose to focus today's service on James Luther Adams, the premier theologian of the 20th century. His is an engaged theology driven by the overarching question, what is the point? What is the point of gathering in religious community? And the answer that he came to and that he shared and spread throughout our faith community is the purpose of our faith is to transform and empower us all to work for love and justice in the world, to sustain us in that work, to provide us with a safe haven in which we gather our strength and are able to turn again to the fight for collective liberation. So that is what we will endeavor to do for one another today. Come, let us worship together, and let's begin by singing number 1002 in their teal hymnal, Comfort Me. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit. Please be seated unless you are a younger person, a child or a kid, in which case I invite you to come forward for some time for all ages. So we don't actually have a book today. Oh, I know, and not only that, but I'm going to talk to you instead of Miss Ginger. I hope that's okay. Do you all know who I am? So my name is Elizabeth, and I am the minister here. I work more with the grown-ups, and Miss Ginger works mostly with the kids, but we both do a lot of both. So we work together. We're buddies. So today in church, we're going to talk about a man called John Luther Adams. And there's actually a picture of him that we can look at on the screen if we want. There we go. So what does he look like? Kind of old-fashioned? Yes. Yeah. So James Luther Adams actually, he was a grown-up in the 60s and the 70s. By the 80s and the 90s, he was very, very old. So he was gone by the time you all were even born. So he is a little old-fashioned. Now, his name is James Luther Adams, but went by JLA. And he's one of the most famous Unitarian Universalist thinkers of the 20th century. And a lot of how we talk about and think about and understand what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist here and now, we actually owe to JLA. Now, one of the ideas he gave us was to think about our UU beliefs as 5 smooth stones. So I have some stones here. Anybody feel like holding a smooth stone? Yeah, I like it. You can pass them around if we don't have enough for everybody. Now, the metaphor of the 5 smooth stones, let's not throw them, but we can pass them. We've got some more. I sometimes like to just hold stones. They help me feel, I don't know, they help me feel centered. So the metaphor of the 5 smooth stones comes from the story of David and Goliath. Do you guys know the story of David and Goliath? All right, so here's a picture that shows us the story of David and Goliath. And some people believe this story really happened, and others believe it's a story that people created and tell each other because it teaches us an important message. In the story, Goliath was a giant and part of an empire that wanted to take over David's home country of Judea. Goliath was at the head of a great army, and the grown-ups in Judea were trying to create an army of their own, but they were a much smaller and poorer nation, so they knew that they were most likely going to lose, and a lot of people would die. The night before the start of the battle, David had a dream in which he came to understand that it was his job to save his people by defeating Goliath in a battle just between the two of them as champions, and this would keep the two armies from fighting a big war. Now, David was a kid. He was a shepherd boy, and Goliath was 10 times bigger than him and 100 times stronger and had experience with swords and was good with the bow and arrow. David didn't have any fancy weapons, but he was really good at using his slingshot to keep wolves away from the sheep. He was really fast with his slingshot, and he was really accurate. So he carefully chose 5 smooth stones. And when the time came for the 2 heroes, one a boy and one a giant, to battle, he just put a stone in his slingshot and aimed for Goliath's great big huge head, and he hit it, and he knocked the giant right out. So that is the story, and it's kind of a violent story. So sometimes when I think of the 5 smooth stones, I think instead of stones that we use to skip on water, and you know how when you skip stones, the ripples spread out? So I think of it as ripples of goodness spreading out instead of clonking people on the head. Now, for JLA, the story pointed to the way seemingly small changes can help solve really big and overwhelming problems. In particular, he sees 5 things that we choose to believe as Unitarian Universalists that, when we act on those beliefs in the world, make a huge difference and can change the direction of history. In other words, he and we believe the way we act in the world can make a difference. JLA's 5 smooth stones are, the first one, revelation is continuous. Those are big grown-up words, but what it means is we keep learning, right? We keep learning about God and life and what's important as we go along. The second smooth stone is that relationships ought to rest on mutual and free consent. No one should be abused, or made to do things that they don't want to do. Nobody should tell anybody else what to do. Nobody should boss them around, right? Except parents. We still have to listen to our parents. Even grown-ups have to listen to our parents. Did you know that? It's just one of those things. The third smooth stone is we need to work together to create a just and loving community. So what this stone means is we can't just think about things. We have to actually be people who make a difference, who bring kindness and courage into our classrooms and our work lives and the wider community. And then we have a commitment to express our faith in society. So we want to do good things. This is something that we believe in common. We want to do good things, because they help show other people what we believe. So express our values in the world. And last but not least, this is my favorite stone, and sometimes it's actually the hardest. We choose to live in hope. So what helps you feel hopeful? Do you know what it means to feel hopeful? Mm-hmm.
To hope, to be hoping, not just get all down because
Right.
things are turning bad. Just being hopeful is something that doesn't help.
Right. So being hopeful means we don't get down, we don't get depressed, or if we do get depressed, we work through it. We just keep hoping that things are going to get better someday. Okay. So what do you think about these? What do you think about these smooth stones, these beliefs? Do you agree with them? Yeah? Which one do you like best? Which one do you think is most important? Maybe the one about nobody telling anybody else what to do?
Yes.
I know when my kids were little, that was the most important one for them. They liked having their autonomy, which is a fancy word for don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, I don't let people tell me what to do unless it's my parents.
Yeah, only our parents. Yeah, and thank goodness that we have such good parents who don't tell us to do things that we really don't want to do, or that don't need to be done, right? We all have kind parents. I know your parents are kind. It's all good. Okay, so which one of these beliefs feels the hardest to act on? Probably the last one, hardest to stay hopeful? Yeah, yes. That's kind of true for me too, but I think it's an important one. It's an important one that we keep our hope going. So you are actually going to talk with Miss Ginger some more about the 5 smooth stones in your children's chapel, and the grown-ups are going to learn more about James Luther Adams. So I hope you have fun, and thank you for spending this time with me. Let's sing the children to their classes with the Reed benediction.
We are at the start of stewardship season, so each week we'll feature a video testimonial. The first one is from Reverend Elizabeth.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Stevens, but you probably already know that. I'm speaking in this moment not as the minister, though, but as a fellow pledging member of the community. When I got separated and then divorced a few years ago, my financial situation changed pretty drastically. As you might imagine, the budget looks really different when one's supporting a household on one income rather than two. So initially, I had to decrease my pledge pretty drastically. But giving to the church is a priority for me. I mean, obviously, I believe in the power of religious community to make the world a better place, or I wouldn't have chosen the career I did. But this church in particular is made up of some of the finest human beings I've ever had the privilege of knowing. I've been able to watch with delight as children and youth bloom, surrounded by love and care and shaped by our shared values. I've seen, heard, and experienced that having a safe and supportive space at the UUCP helps we adults be braver and kinder and more effective in our work out in the world. What we do truly does matter, not just internally, but to the whole community of the Palouse. So each year, I've tightened my budget in other places so that I could increase my monthly pledge. This year, I'm finally able to pledge again at the sustainer fair share level again. That's a full 10% of my discretionary income. Now, we say that we don't want people to give until it hurts, but to give until it feels good. That said, when the automatic withdrawal goes through each month, I feel it. $200 is a really big number for me, a definite stretch. I'm willing and happy to stretch, though, because I believe so wholeheartedly in what we're doing together. Now, I want to acknowledge that I'm able to do this because I'm well and fairly compensated by this congregation, and thank you for that. But the great thing about fair share giving is that it takes all of our fixed expenses into account. The consumer culture puts a lot of pressure on us to use what's left after our have-tos to buy more stuff. Spending a big chunk of that money to support the UUCP instead makes it easier to resist that pressure, to stay true to my values. So as you are considering whether or how much you can pledge for the coming year, I encourage you to try stretching too. Maybe if you usually give a single donation, consider a monthly gift or even weekly. Maybe consider adding another zero to the check you are going to write. This is a year when we collectively need to stretch to meet the costs associated with our new building, including additional staff to support our ministries. Stretching feels good, I promise. It's like yoga. I honestly can't imagine a better way of spending my money than financially supporting and sustaining this community, which does so much good for so many people. Please join me in pledging generously. I love you all.
Now let's take a moment to engage in the practice of generosity together. For those of you who are able to make a financial contribution, the logistics are on your screen. We'd invite you to either copy down the information you need or simply go to the website to make a donation. The web address is in the chat. Those of you who are newer or visiting from another part of the country may not be aware that we typically give away all of our cash from our Sunday offering to local charities whose mission align with our values, a program called Month of Sundays. This month, the recipient is Planned Parenthood in Pullman. Planned Parenthood's mission is to provide high-quality sexual and reproductive health care services to all people in need and that all people need and deserve, with respect and compassion. If you are donating online, you can choose Month of Sundays from the drop-down menu. If you are mailing or dropping off a check, simply indicate in the memo line where it is intended, whether it is intended for the month of Sundays or for our general fund. In the spirit of love and for the continuing work of this church, we will now take some time to practice generosity together.
For our meditation today, I thought we might return to the 5 smooth stones that I talked about with the children. These are foundational principles that help us keep going, keep becoming, keep working to create the world we dream of. So I invite you to imagine yourself holding the first stone. Feel its weight, its coolness. James Luther Adams writes, "We must depend upon a transforming reality that breaks through encrusted forms of life and thought to create new forms. We put our faith in a creative reality that is recreative. Revelation is continuous." Can you embrace the path of curiosity and humility, always learning? Can you accept that there's always a possibility that you might be wrong? Now imagine setting down that first stone and picking up the second. Envision cradling it in your hand. He writes, "Relations between persons ought ideally to rest on mutual free consent and not on coercion." Can we release the desire to control or manipulate? Can we value the relationship more than being right? Can we refrain from intimidation, bullying, argument, and put our faith instead in the slow and gentle process of conversion through conversation, compassion, and love? Now imagine setting down that second stone and picking up the third. He writes, "We have a moral obligation to direct our efforts toward the establishment of a just and loving community." We get tired sometimes. It's okay to rest. It's okay to mourn. But when we are restored, are we willing to pick up the pieces and keep on moving forward? Are we willing to embrace our capacity to make the world a better place? Now imagine taking the fourth stone in your hands. He writes, "The creation of justice in community requires the organization of power. The faith of a church or of a nation is an adequate faith only when it inspires and enables people to give of their time and energy to shape the various institutions, social, economic, and political, of the common life." What are the institutions we are willing to give our time and energy to? How are we using our power? And now imagine picking up the fifth and final stone. He writes, "There is something in the genuine liberal perspective that, while recognizing the tragic nature of the human condition, continues to live with a dynamic hope." How do we keep hope alive? Can we help one another find hope, even in difficult times? These 5 stones seem small, especially when compared to the weapons deployed by the forces of oppression, greed and fear and divisiveness. But these stones, they are effective, and they are ours. You keep them in your back pocket. May we pass them back and forth. May we know that in the fight for collective liberation, there may be defeats and setbacks, but history shows a clear progression. In the end, love always wins. So be it, and so may it be. Our reading this morning comes from an essay called "Radical Laicism in the Prophethood of All Believers" by James Luther Adams. In principle, our orientation, our point of identity, is to powers that are creative and sustaining and transforming, not ultimately of our own making, but rather gifts. In a sense, these powers depend on us to respond. Our vocation is to point to these powers and to respond to them for the sake of freedom and mutuality, Radical laicism, stemming from the Reformation, has asserted that the creative and transforming powers are accessible to the individual, but at the same time call for the covenant of common responsibilities. Two aspects of radical laicism require special attention: what have been called the priesthood and the prophethood of all believers. The priesthood of all believers refers at least to two things. In all religions, the priest points to holy things and offers thanks. The priest is also concerned with the care of souls. It is then the vocation of the laity to express and to elicit a sense of the sacredness, the holiness, the preciousness of all gifts of creation. It is the vocation of the laity that everyone shall be concerned with interpersonal fellowship in the family, in friendship, in work and play, and particularly in affectional relatedness to those especially in need. The priesthood of all believers is inextricably related to the prophethood. Either of these without the other is a snare and a deception, a violation of any viable covenant, a corruption of the best, which leads to the worst. The prophethood of believers entails the obligation to share in the analysis, criticism, and transformation of institutions, including the analysis and transformation of the church. It requires the capacity to discern and define the actual world about us, and in a timely way, to envisage the potentialities latent in it, and in the creative and transforming powers, the ultimate resource. What happened to my homily? Oh my goodness. Let me just try refreshing. You didn't print it? Did you delete it? I think you did. I think you deleted it. Yeah.
So we can, with Google Docs, you can go and get the history and pull it up.
Okay, how do I do that?
Does somebody want to play piano? Alex, do you want to play a little bit?
What's that?
Alex, come play the piano.
Ah, there it is. Oh. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, yeah. James Luther Adams was born not far from here in Ritzville, Washington. Do y'all know where Ritzville is? Mm-hmm. So his father was an itinerant Brethren preacher, very conservative. JLA's earliest memory was of his father praying for the second coming in the middle of a dust storm as the family huddled under the dining room table. By the time he began college, JLA had rejected the faith he was raised in, which may sound familiar to some of us. He embraced humanism and atheism under the influence of John Dietrich and became a campus radical. He would attack religion publicly as one of the authors of a sheet called Angels Revolt. In his senior year, he took a class on public speaking, and in every one of his assigned speeches, he railed against religion. So imagine his response when his professor in that class, Frank Rarig, in a conversation about what James Luther Adams might do with his life, said, "Well, of course, you are destined to be a preacher." It took a little while, but eventually JLA realized Rehrig was right and he enrolled in Harvard Divinity School. Now, an interesting part of the story is that JLA made 2 trips to Germany in the years leading up to World War II. During the first, when he was in divinity school, he attended a Nazi rally and was asking questions, trying to understand what was going on. He almost got assaulted. Rescued by an unemployed anti-Nazi, he learned, and I quote, that one organization after the other that refused to bow to the Nazis was being threatened with compulsion. The totalitarian process had begun. Freedom of association was being abolished. You keep your mouth shut and you conform, or you get your head bashed in. During his second trip, 10 years later, what stood out for him was how ineffective the liberal churches were in responding to the rise of totalitarianism. This experience, he was very keen on the German theologians, so the experience of seeing how ineffective the churches were kind of broke his heart a little bit. And it also made him realize the insufficiency of his own participation in democracy. He wrote, "I realized it wasn't enough to just stay informed by reading the paper and vote." When he returned to the US, he became more politically active, establishing grassroots organizations that worked for justice, particularly against racism and McCarthyism. But he also spent the rest of his academic career, he taught at Meadville Lombard in Chicago, at Harvard, and at Andover Newton, wrestling with the role of religious community in society. His life work was to construct a theological framework that would transform liberal churches in general and Unitarian Universalist churches in particular into institutions capable of bending the arc of history toward justice. If our churches weren't able to play a role in building a better world, then in JLA's opinion, they would and probably should become irrelevant and fade away. JLA died in 1994, just before I started seminary. So I am a generation removed from his direct influence, but elder colleagues quoted him with abandon, and we had to read many of his essays in seminary. You got the flavor of them. They're pretty academic, dry, dense, but brilliant nonetheless. He paved the way for a new understanding of what church is for, what religious community is for. Rather than being a place where a wise, learned authority figure taught Bible stories, or a social club where like-minded people gathered for potlucks and discussions, sort of the 2 models of Unitarian Universalism at the time, he taught that our congregations should be seminaries for the laity, training and empowering people to claim their own authority, to identify their piece of the work required to heal the world. He taught that our attention should not be on questions of theology or dogma, but on how to prevent the rise of totalitarianism in our own country, and how to promote justice, equity, and liberation of the oppressed. He gifted us with this concept summarized in the reading, the priesthood of all believers and the prophethood of all believers. JLA felt that not just clergy, but everyone should be engaged in the work of nurturing community, caring for one another, and cultivating practices of gratitude and awe. What JLA called the priesthood of all believers, we now call shared ministry. And it's a key reason that we're able to do church well here. Meanwhile, the prophethood of all believers evolved into our concept of social justice. Our all-week faith focuses on living our values out loud, out in the public square. Moved by the suffering in the world, each and every one of us chooses some way, whether big or small, to make a positive difference in the world. So obviously, it's not a coincidence that I'm lifting up today words and ideas that grew from seeds planted when JLA witnessed the rise of fascism in Germany. Extremists, those of us here on the Palouse, live either in or adjacent to a state that is sliding into fascism. Extremists have taken control of the Idaho Republican Party, and they're working to keep our universities from teaching an accurate version of history. They're working to prevent pregnant people from the basic right, or pregnant people from having access to the reproductive care they need, denying the basic right to bodily autonomy. They're going after our libraries, hoping to keep closed minds and hearts closed, rather than allowing the power of stories to move us all toward a more compassionate and accepting way of being. They're going after drag shows. I mean, Jesus, don't they have anything better to do? They not only refuse to grant basic human rights protections to LGBTQ folk, but they're actively trying to discriminate against and harm anyone whose sexuality or gender identity falls outside the narrow box of cis het. So we need to be asking ourselves the same question that JLA asked himself when he got back from Germany. How can we, as a community, as an institution, and as individuals, fight against the rising tide of totalitarianism? So JLA has passed along his weapons of choice, those 5 smooth stones, the beliefs that inspired him to action throughout his life. Revelation is continuous. This is not the end of the story. There's more to learn, more to figure out. Outside of the TV game shows, there are no final answers. Relationships ought to rest on mutual and free consent. We aren't going to be able to bully people into being kinder or more open-minded. We can enter into a relationship and build connections. We can invite people to consider new perspectives, but we need to hold those intentions lightly because no one likes being manipulated. We need to work together to create a more just and loving community. There's no hero waiting in the wings to fix everything that's broken, to save us. It's up to us. We're the ones we've been waiting for. And we have a commitment to express our faith in society. This is not a social club or a place to get a free cup of coffee on Sunday morning. Our tagline is, what we do matters. And last but not least, we choose hope. And not a blind optimism, but the messy kind of hope. There's this poem I love that made the rounds. It's by Caitlin Seda. Hope is not a bird, Emily. It's a sewer rat. Hope is not the thing with feathers that comes home to roost when you need it most. Hope is an ugly thing with teeth and claws and patchy fur that's seen some stuff. It's what thrives in the discards and survives in the ugliest parts of our world, able to find a way to go on when nothing else can even find a way in. It's the gritty, nasty little carrier of such diseases as optimism, persistence, perseverance, and joy, transmissible as it drags its tail across your path and bites you in the butt. Hope is not some delicate, beautiful bird, Emily. It's a lowly little sewer rat that snorts pesticides like they were lines of coke and still shows up on time to work the next day, looking no worse for wear. So that's the kind of hope that will keep us going, that will keep us fighting against all odds. Now, it may be that JLA's framing of the 5 smooth stones doesn't resonate for you. So I'm going to offer you a more recent version created by Unitarian Universalists in the Mountain Desert District. They call this the 5 jagged rocks. They chose jagged rocks instead of smooth stones because they want to recognize a faith that is dangerous and not always smooth going. The stones are jagged in the acknowledgement that we aren't perfect, theologically or otherwise. We're rough around the edges, and that doesn't make us less effective or valid. So the 5 jagged rocks are, there is a unity that makes us one. All souls are sacred and worthy. Courageous love transforms the world. Truth continues to be revealed, and we are working towards salvation in this life on this earth, here and now. There's also the work of the Article 2 Commission to rework our beloved principles and purposes. We'll likely be talking more about this project next year, but for now I'm going to share a piece of their current draft. Love is the enduring force that holds us together. As Unitarian Universalists and religious community, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist each other in engaging our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom and reason, hope and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love inspires and powers the passion with which we embody our values, inseparable from one another, These shared values are justice, generosity, evolution, pluralism, equity, and interdependence. I think their framing is quite elegant, and I also love our 7 principles, so it'll be interesting to see how we all respond. We get to vote on this. This is a decision that we get to make. I don't know if we're ready to embrace this new iteration of association-wide identity work. Who does know? So, as I said, we'll likely have some more conversation about the Article 2 project, but in the meantime, even if none of these words work for you, here you get to choose your own. And in the end, the exact words don't matter. Our actions matter. If our faith, our beliefs don't inspire us to action, don't help us be braver, kinder, and wiser, then it's time for us to find some new ones. Now, I get it. We don't all want to step up as social justice warriors. When I started on my path toward ministry, I really thought I would be spending most of my time reading and thinking and just being with people in a gentle way. I never envisioned that I would be called to help found an organization to fight for reproductive rights. I wouldn't have guessed that I'd be helping to get people across state lines so that they could get gender-affirming care. I didn't realize I'd be organizing marches and rallies, or that I might be willing to engage in civil disobedience. I didn't know then that writing postcards to get out the vote can be a form of prayer. But these are the times we live in, and these are the sorts of actions our beliefs are going to lead us to take. We don't have to always be gracious about it. I actually complained to my spiritual director last month. I was like, Sarah, I don't want to be a social justice warrior. I never wanted to be a social justice warrior. But our shared values and my deepest faith lead us inexorably toward an ever greater commitment to acting in ways that create justice and peace, even as society sometimes seems to be moving in the other direction, especially here in Idaho. Now, David the shepherd boy didn't get to be good with his slingshot overnight. He practiced for years and years and years and years, so we're still learning how to be effective in our justice work. I'm sure we need more practice. And we may also need to be reminded that we don't fight for justice because we expect to win. We fight for justice because that's who we are. We fight so that we can sleep at night, so that when we look in the mirror, we like the person that we see. It's about integrity, not victory. What do we do if they win? We fight for the rights of all people. And what do we do if they lose? The very same thing, beloveds. So, these are the beliefs that ground and inspire me. I believe that there are as many ways to be human as there are humans. I believe that every person deserves to be safe and supported and free to become the person they're meant to be. I also believe that the world will be better for everyone when we are all free. I believe that evil stems from fear and that love is the only effective way to meet that fear. And I believe that in the end, love always wins, and that despite all the evidence to the contrary, this stupid idea that some people are better than others, or some ways of being human are better than others, I believe that stupid idea is in its final days. We are witnessing the last struggles of a dying and outdated ideology. And while we might not all live to see the forces of love and justice defeat corporate greed, white supremacy, and patriarchy, the children down that hall, I think they most likely will. Above all, I believe that together we can accomplish amazing things. As we support one another and learn from each other and love and care about everyone we meet, we grow and change. We figure out what is ours to do. And then we just do it, like Nike. And the world changes. So be it, and so may it be. We're going to sing There Is More Love now. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit.
Our closing reading is from A Faith for the Free in the Prophethood of All Believers by James Luther Adams. The community of justice and love is not an ethereal fellowship that is above the conflicts and turmoils of the world. It is one that takes shape in nature and history, one that requires the achievement of freedom with respect to material resources as well as with respect to spiritual resources. Indeed, the one kind of freedom is not genuine without the other. Freedom requires a body as well as a spirit. We live not by spirit alone. A purely spiritual religion is a purely spurious religion. It is one that exempts its believer from surrender to the sustaining, transforming reality that demands the community of justice and love.
Our sung benediction is a piece by Emma's Revolution. It's called Keep On Moving Forward. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit. I'm gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. You got it now? Let's do it again. We keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Please say with me the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish our chalice, that it might grow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. Beloveds, life is messy. It's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We have to cope with chaos and mess and people who do stupid things and believe stupid things. It's just par for the course. But you know what? You know what? We are going to keep on moving forward because we know what is right and we know what is true and we know what is ours to do, which is to build the community of love and justice in all ways, large and small, wherever we go. And I am so glad that I'm doing that with you. I love you. Go in peace. Don't forget to go downstairs for coffee and to buy tickets for the quilt. Don't forget to take the cheers off to one side, or the cushions and the hymnals, and come back next Sunday. Go in peace.
Oh my God. I We're just giving people up. Yeah. Or they know their access. Everybody else.